appreciated and also respected. And ideal, when that happens, it becomes easier for both the parties to come away feeling like they have been seen, heard, and that they've learned a lot through the dialogue. And when they're able to do that for each other, automatically goodwill comes up, automatically trust building happens, and empathy is encouraged as well. And this is the first step to any lasting relationship building process. As complex and as simple as this sounds, dialogue is a matter of practice. And in nonviolent communication, what we could consciously do is take the invitation to dialogue very seriously while we practice on how to express for ourselves and are also sensitive of how we are coming across to the other, while we are respecting the space of the other to be themselves just the same way. So that is how this reciprocity is maintained, and that is how a dialogue is facilitated. Generally, you need a facilitator to allow this to take place properly, somebody who's moderating and making sure that even if there's a group or if there is a one-on-one dialogue, that the rules are maintained. The rules and the framework remains one of the most important details of this conversation, just like in nonviolent communication, where dialogue is a very big part of the process. The method and the process, the steps are important in order to get to the desired outcome. So having said that, I will stop right here. This is the end of the presentation. And we have like 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes, if I'm not wrong, when we can have a quick discussion on the dialogue as a tool and the process. And I take any other reflections that you may have on the presentation. I've deliberately kept 15 minutes in order to make sure that I can interact with you. So now would be a good time. Abhinay, if you'd like to facilitate a discussion, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, this is Veena, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for reinstating the various aspects and roles of dialogues in nonviolent communication, ma'am. It was totally a different point of view from what we've been hearing for so many weeks. So the floor is open for questions. The participants may raise the questions to Sohini, ma'am.
I'm a little curious what you've been learning, which is different from what I've presented. If any of you would like to mention. Veena, if you'd like to go ahead. Can you hear me?
Ma'am, Dr. T.S. Varadarajan sir has raised a hand. So, if you have any queries, please go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Veena, and thank you very much, ma'am, Dr. Sohini, and your presentation has been very effective and quite clear, where we are able to understand the importance of dialogue from multiple perspectives. I would like to add one aspect of how dialogue can be made more effective if it is meaningful. If we just take this Ukraine Russia issue now, on one hand, Ukraine depends on NATO, and Russia negates it. America intervenes. We Indians, we have a diplomacy. And if there is any meaningful dialogue which has been dismally missing between Russia and Ukraine, there won't be any problem. Actually, both of the parties must be open-minded to set the or to solve the problem is one aspect. And when you began talking about the Socratic method, where Socrates was asking his disciples to question everything, from that time onwards, there has been in our psyche that questioning becomes very important. Whether we get answers or not, making questioning and also developing a kind of we attitude. You made it very clear that when we give our opinion, it has to be like I attitude. Normally, in a dialogue or for that matter in a classroom situation where instead of using I teach you this, I have an idea this. Instead, when we go for we have an idea, we are talking about it. In that case, the actual point with which the person tries to put across will reach very effectively, ma'am, if we use a we attitude. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very valuable, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective on the matter. Yes, indeed. I think dialogue would solve a lot of problems in the world. Should we try to work within the framework of dialogue? But I also do understand that in most diplomatic cases at the level of international diplomacy, one of the things which is not factored in fact, two things that are not factored in most of the time are the angle of identity and how a consciousness of identity and a sense of historic community plays in defining political goals that again inform the popular narrative. There's always a history behind a conflict. There are always historic wounds which are raked up and which are utilized by political stakeholders to not allow for a dialogue, a true dialogue in that sense. And that I think has been one of the major issues why reconciliation processes are so difficult in the world today. I mean, reconciliation mostly happens at the level of communities, if you'd notice. At the level of countries, nations, it is it is barely possible. There can be a peace treaty, there can be an understanding, maybe a negotiation, but to actually reconcile relationships in that sense is a very far-fetched dream. This is as far as my personal opinion is concerned. One of the reasons being that we do not factor in how community identity plays into the whole scene. How community identity is being used in the political narrative, and are we using the right words? Are we using the right narrative to redefine the problem? So if we are looking at the problem in a way in which we only highlight the issues which do not allow the problem to be solved, then we are not exactly in a state to facilitate a true dialogue where we are encouraging the other party to come up with the other side of the story of where relationships can be healed. Yes, yes, Doctor.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry for the interruption. Actually, you tell us how to reach to a party. As just we have said that when we don't allow others to listen to us or to make them understand what they have to get it from us. What is your ideal solution for any dialogue to reach to the opposite party or the person whom we negotiate with?
So it is my belief that first of all there should be a mainstreaming of you know conflict resolution processes which take identity into account while we are framing dialogues at different levels, and that the dialogue should not just be at the level of you know at the level of national diplomacy, but should be also uh, at the level of local stakeholders, community stakeholders, and the connections across borders which are not very clearly defined all the time just in nationalistic terms. So if there are multiple tracks of dialogues that are happening, and over there we are factoring in how identity conflicts can be resolved, while very consciously looking at community identity, identities which are utilized in framing political problems or political issues, and the way we are looking at the history of that problem. If that can be that if our diplomats and if negotiation teams can come to the table while having a very close look at that, while looking at reconciliation as the ultimate goal, then there could be value based engagement that can bring parties to um, consider what is good for both the parties at stake. I'll give you a simple example over here just to make things clear. So there is an entire field which has emerged, which you would probably know of: faith-based reconciliation, faith-based diplomacy. Our beloved Gandhiji was a faith-based diplomat himself. So in faith-based diplomacy, there is an organization called the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, uh, based out of Washington D.C. And from 2002 to 2008 or 9, they did a number of these reconciliation dialogues, for instance, in Kashmir, and they've done it in a number of regions as well across the world. And these reconciliation dialogues were simply aimed towards building more public opinion, which is based on a common value system that the community together can relate to. They work with the communities based on their own community value systems to bring them together to stand for a particular political position which is favorable to both. So that is one example of how these kind of processes over time can actually be ideally very powerful to shape the way probably governments would also look at coming together and looking at conflict resolution. Over what extent that will actually happen or is actually feasible is still a question. I think not many scholars have been able to put a conclusive remark on. So that would be my perspective, if that answers your question, sir. Did it answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, thank you. Though it is a little bit elaborative, but you have made it very clear that how it can be done. And can you tell us, ma'am, what are the ways or what are the qualities to be possessed by someone who is a successful a conversationalist? Like, what qualities can make a dialogue a successful one? Like, though
Okay.
it is a kind of abstract question, just to try
No,
to make some of
it's actually a very very good question, sir. In fact, in the dialogue, besides the parties who are in dialogue, there is a third party facilitator also present who's important to the conversation. So it's very important in order for the dialogue to be successful that while both the parties are coming to the table consenting to be in that dialogue, the consent factor is very important. They have to consent to be in the dialogue and abide by the rules of the dialogue. That is essential for the dialogue to be successful. But for the